Hello, I'm Sumit. Welcome to the Net Hero podcast. This podcast is for you if you're interested in business and reducing our carbon footprint. Our belief is that better business leads to a better planet. Who wouldn't want to make things that have less impact on our society? It's a podcast for people who are inventors, academics, people working in the energy sector, or from any different field that believe that they can do something better to make the products and services we use every day less harmful. Now, we've been running for about 3 years and it's been very successful with about 36,000 downloads and plenty more, massive engagement. But this show now needs a sponsor. We've done it editorially for all these years, but we need your help. So we know you've got a loyal audience out there. If you'd like to get involved and sponsor the show, then email me on the email just below on your screen. And we'd like to see if you're the right fit for us and that you've got the same vision we have. Now, on to this week's episode. Boats. Oh, yes. Frigging in the rigging, as they say. In this episode of the Net Hero podcast, I want to talk about something that perhaps you don't understand as much because I don't really understand as much. But ships, boats, cargo ships. That's how we get most of the things that we either eat or wear or drive in or watch. And it's incredible that the world still uses shipping as a way of moving goods around the planet. Shipping is about 2% of global emissions, and it's a significant part of global emissions if you think about it, because it's such a necessary part of trading. So what is the shipping industry doing about it? And what lessons can be learned in the wider scope of kind of engine technology? Because if we're going to decarbonise the planet, we've got to make sure that big, heavy stuff is moved around. Things like trains, planes, and of course, ships. Well, to discuss that today, I'm joined by Roger Holm, who is the president at Wärtsilä, executive vice president of marine and energy. And he joins me from Helsinki. Hello, Helsinki. I always wanted to say that.
Hello, Sumit.
A bit too much Eurovision.
Hello, Sumit. Thanks for having me here today.
Here are the votes of the Finnish jury. Okay, tell us a little bit about Wärtsilä first of all. So if people may have heard the name, I kind of heard it, but I don't really know what the company does.
Yeah, happy to do so. And Wärtsilä, actually, we have a birthday this year. We turn 190 years this year, so established 1834. And the name Wärtsilä is coming from a small village in the eastern part of Finland, actually named Wärtsilä, so that's our origin. We were started as a sawmill back then, but we have done, I would almost say anything during the years, a lot of different industrial productions, from agricultural machines to tableware to shipyard even, but now we have two focus areas in Wärtsilä. And one is marine, where we have the widest portfolio of offering in the industry. Engines, propulsion, carbon capture, hybrids, batteries, digital solution. And then we have another part of the business as well, which is energy, where we use the same engine technology for engine power plants. And that then can be for balancing power when the sun is not shining, the wind is not blowing. But the key element for us in Wärtsilä is decarbonisation. That's what we talk about. It's our strategy in one word.
You make engines, simply.
Correct.
Yeah? You make the engines. So you don't make the fuel that goes in them. Traditionally, I'm in my 50s, so I remember going, when I was a kid, you go out on a big ferry or something. Way before there was hovercrafts, which were really cool. Don't see those anymore. But, you'd smell. When you get on the ferry, you can smell the diesel. And you get on most boats these days, you can still smell the diesel. Is that the real main fuel globally still? It's still kind of the thing that powers shipping around the world?
It is, but it's changing actually quite radically.
Right.
It's both diesel, but also LNG, so liquefied natural gas, is also a fuel gaining a lot of traction, which is one part of the transformation towards the decarbonisation. But why I'm saying it's transforming a lot is that actually the International Maritime Organization made a significant decision July last year, with now targeting to take the global shipping to net zero by 2050.
Whoa, that is
2050
big.
that sounds long far in the future. So when I say that, everyone says, "Oh, you have plenty of time." But
No, I think that's quite difficult. The scale of it is huge.
it is, because what this means is that this is one vessel lifetime. A vessel lifetime is around 25-30 years. So you can say that now the target of global shipping is to go net zero in one vessel lifetime. That's like you would take the cars to net zero in 12 years time around the globe. And I think we all know that's almost impossible, but that's what we are targeting in shipping now.
What do we take? I said in the intro a little bit here, you know, everything from the clothes we wear to kind of the TVs, but it is all kinds of goods, isn't it? It's still on boats.
Yeah. And more than 80% of global trade is handled through ships. So it's really the lifeline of global trade. And of course, it's all from cargo to passenger transports. And we have around 100,000 ships around the globe. So it's still, it's a significant impact when you look at it. It's a really global business impacting almost all countries on the globe.
It is interesting because we see, you know, the invasion in Ukraine, how it created a shock, and then obviously the Middle East, and then you suddenly had the trouble in the Suez Canal just a little while ago when that boat got stuck, and then all that, and how it can take just one ship can cause chaos to go trade. So I suppose the significance of decarbonising shipping is actually quite big, because I think we were saying earlier it's about 2%, which doesn't sound a lot, but it's global, and it's also, there are big industries often in places which are hit very much by climate change. You look at the Philippines, you look at Southeast Asia, big sort of shipping, stripping ships down, China, all of that. So would you say that, you know, the decarbonisation of shipping is actually quite a significant thing for us to get our heads around?
Yeah, for sure it is. It's regarded as one of the hard industries to decarbonize. And the reason is that you can't electrify shipping like you can do in many other industries.
Because the weight of the batteries, I assume, is it?
Yeah, and the space need. You need, to put it very simple, you need something more on a ship than just to fill it with batteries. So you need either cargo or people. And that means that the engine technology that we are using is actually a very good one, because it gives you the flexibility. You might invest in a ship now that, for example, runs on LNG today, and then when green fuel gets available, you can convert the engine to run on, for example, green methanol, or later on for green ammonia. So it gives you the flexibility to change the ship during the lifetime of the vessel, which is needed to get to net zero by 2050.
Let's talk about the engines, because you talk about that. I assume that the technology is pretty much what it was in the days of the Titanic. You know, it's an engine that turns, I don't know, a screw that turns a propeller. That's basically it, correct still?
It in a very simple way, but not, because what has changed is that you start, it's like a power plant on board a vessel to some extent.
Okay.
So you get a lot more flexibility. So you can do what we call even a hybrid electric installation. So you combine engines that you can then transform over time to different fuels. You can have a battery to make it even more efficient installations. And then you use that electric production on board to then run the propeller.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you saying that the engine can be sort of modular then? It's not like one block. You can add bits to it. Is that how they're built these days?
Yeah, you have, in most installations, you have several engines. So you can have 4 or 6 engines depending on the configuration. It depends a bit on the configuration. And then on top of that, what's of course the most important one during the times we live in now is that you can actually then make sure that you can get the flexibility to use different fuels. You might need to do some changes on the engine, but still the base is still the same.
So let's talk about the kind of fuels. Now, I've done a podcast with some people from Siemens talking about synthetic fuels for cars. And you said at present, there's still diesel, but there's quite a lot of LNG. What are the kinds of fuels that are coming down the line? And I know you're not a fuel company, but obviously you've got to react to what is being produced to make sure the engines still work. So can you take us through what kind of fuels are coming and what it would mean for engines? Because it would be nice to understand what sort of emissions come out of a boat right now.
We see we will go from a fairly single fuel environment to a multi-fuel environment over time. And what we see now on the fuel side happening is already methanol has taken up quite a lot. Already last year, more than half of the capacity ordered for container ships were for methanol as a fuel,
Right.
already last year. So that's for green methanol. And what we are...
Is that a cleaner fuel then in terms of emissions?
Absolutely, because then you could still go, you still have carbon in the fuel, but if it's green methanol, you can still say it's a carbon neutral fuel.
Understood.
But then the other fuel we see coming maybe a bit later than the methanol is green ammonia. And the benefit with ammonia is that it's carbon free. So here you have a fuel, if it's made as a green fuel, that could be carbon free in the future. That's the other potential fuel we see coming into maritime.
You said the life of a boat is about 25 years, right?
Correct.
So in that time, go back 25 years, wow, what a change in technologies we've had in 25 years. Yeah. So you're going to have a thought about how you make these things future-proof, the engine's future-proof, or does it just mean that the owner of the boat or whoever has to keep swapping the engine out every kind of 5 years for a different one? The way we change our boilers, for example, at home.
Yeah, you don't do it like that, because still, if you need to change the whole engine, that's a massive investment.
I was going to say.
That would be too expensive. So for big engines like this, which is also the future-proof approach of an engine, is that you change certain parts of the engine when you convert from one fuel to the other, but still the whole base of the engine is the same. And that's the great part of using engines for this transformation, because you might convert an LNG fueled engine to a methanol fueled engine, and you can do it after 10 years if you so decide, and you have the fuel available. The key thing is that you prepare the vessel for the fuel tanks of the different fuels so that you can...
That's what I was going to talk about. Yeah, absolutely.
So the engine technology is already there today. We have sold quite a lot of methanol engines already. We have been running on methanol in some installations already since 2015. So we have a lot of experience on methanol. And last year we also launched the first ammonia engines. So the technology is there. The key element will be to get the green fuel availability.
BP, to name one, Siemens is another. There's loads of companies working on hydrogen, right? And they see hydrogen as a potential for shipping. Where do you sit on that? Are you looking at hydrogen as a possible fuel your engines will be running on in the next decade or so?
We are also developing hydrogen for our engines. So our plan is to have the technology concept ready for that next year, so 2025. But we see that more for our land-based business, because the challenge for pure hydrogen on a ship is it takes too much space. It's too complex and takes too much space. So if you compare to existing fuels, it's about 20 times the space on existing.
What, in terms of how you liquefy it?
On the volume, because what could be realistic in shipping is that you do compressed hydrogen, and then it would be 20 times the space of existing fuel. Methanol and ammonia are also taking more space, but it's a better compromise. It's 2 to 4 times more space than existing fuel. But 20 times is too much.
So all of this is really interesting, because as a layperson, this all comes into the basic thing. The boat's got to carry stuff, right? And it's got to be of a certain weight, otherwise it'll sink. And you've got to make the right kind of fuel ratio to make it profitable for people. So is this all in the calculations that's going on in the shipping world, which is you can't just go, hang on, that's the cleanest, greenest fuel. But actually, if it's more dense, or as you say, it takes more space, it won't be economically viable, will it?
Correct. So we still need the green hydrogen, but the green hydrogen will be transformed to then, for example, green ammonia. So you change the format of the fuel, because if you want to transport green hydrogen, you anyhow probably need to transform it to green ammonia, and then you can equally use that green ammonia to power ships as well, because green ammonia will be a suitable fuel for vessels.
Use of batteries, you mentioned it earlier. People think about fuel cell technology as well. Do you think that's not really going to work with shipping? You think ships still in 2050 will be engine based?
I think engines will play a significant role. We probably will see more fuel cells on ship over time, but then it will be solid oxide fuel cells. If you use the PEM fuel cells, then it's again with hydrogen as a fuel, and then you have the problem with the fuel availability or the fuel space on board.
Yeah.
And PEMs are the ones that are used more today. Solid oxide is a bit further away from technology readiness, but that's also coming. But it comes then with certain limitations on how you run it, and what you actually need on a ship is a fairly flexible way of running, producing power, and there the engine is good. So I could see still in 2050 you might have an installation with a fuel cell, an engine, and batteries working all together. But we see that engines will play a role also in 2050. You need it for the power production on board.
One thing I've never understood, we have them, I suppose it's because they're flipping dangerous, but nuclear technology has been around for decades. Submarines use nuclear and batteries, from what I understand. Why has that never really taken off in shipping? Is it just the cost? Is it the danger? What is it?
It's a bit of both, and then you come that on nuclear you have a lot of local regulations, and as a ship you need to be able to enter ports of many different countries. And if you there are other issues as well, but if you just start from that challenge that you don't have a global regulation, and we see that there is a lot of resistance on saying that you will have nuclear power ships coming.
But you could have them, couldn't you?
Technically you could, because they are already existing today, especially on the Navy side, you have nuclear powered ships. But then you come both to what's the financial feasibility, and then you come also to the regulations. So we don't see nuclear
as part of it.
A major role in 2050.
Before we go, you talked about the energy side as well. And this is, I don't know, you're probably aware we've had an election in the UK recently, and a new government that wants to sort of push forward more on the net zero. And one of the things people talk about is exactly what you mentioned earlier, which is we're going to have a gap. We have a gap between, as we start to get more renewables, if we get more onshore wind as well as offshore wind, you're going to have standing capacity, which used to be coal-fired power stations. Now it's gas. Eventually you want to get rid of it. Where do you see what you're doing and those engines you're building now for kind of standby power, what are they going to be fueled for the energy sector?
I think there we will see the same as on shipping, because the good thing is that you can run the engines on green fuels here as well, which on a land-based installation equally well could be a hydrogen-based fuel, because here you don't have the same space problem as a ship.
Of course, understood.
Here the engine can support with both methanol, ammonia, and hydrogen, depending on the need that you have in a power plant. And the good thing with our engine is it's extremely fast to ramp up power. So it's very good for flexibility in your grid. And that means that when you need this flexibility, you have an engine that is very fast to ramp up. So when the sun is not shining, when the wind is not blowing, you need the balancing power, and here the same engine technology is there to support.
Do you have any of these installations energy-wise in the UK, or are you in other nations?
We have already quite a lot of balancing power installations. US actually has been one of the front runners on balancing power, where we have our installations there. So it's again coming back to what I said earlier. It's to drive the decarbonisation of both marine and energy.
Where are you as your own company trying to clean up your act? Because every company has to start to cut back its own carbon footprint. So what is Wärtsilä doing around its own stuff? Because obviously you're developing this stuff, but it all uses energy to develop it.
Yeah, it's a very valid question. We have a set, what we call a set for 30 target. So we have a target to be carbon neutral in our own operations by 2030.
Wow, that's not long to go. 5 years.
No, it's not long, and we're actually well on track with that target. And it's not only that one. We also said by 2030 we want to have a portfolio enabling carbon neutral operations for our customers by 2030. Then it's of course up to the fuel availability, but we are also well on track to provide our engines to run on the different green fuels already today, and more is in the pipeline for that. So we spend a lot on R&D, much more than before now, to develop our engines to run on the green fuels.
Before we end this, there's a big thing that's happening here. I don't know if it's the same in Finland, but it's starting to happen over Europe. Decentralization of the grid. So much more local generation, local power. How small could your sort of, backup power elements be? Because I'm assuming they're fairly big things that have to be in sort of big, like almost on power plants or whatever. But are you exploring this idea as communities start to get much more, not fractured in terms of power, but the idea is that, particularly in the UK, we want to get much more local control, local balancing. All the network operators are becoming sort of slightly balancing operators, DSOs as well, so that they're assuming a future where there's communities that might have solar panels or, a wind turbine, or maybe, even still some sort of small fuel plant, but then they need to balance locally as they store. Are you trying to bring some of your technology to a smaller scale to look for that future market?
It is. I would take it from that angle that, of course, you need to have a specific size. But if you look of the history where we have been involved in Wärtsilä, we have a lot of islands that are relying on Wärtsilä as a power.
Yeah.
So even before the green transformation, so throughout the world there are actually quite many islands where Wärtsilä is the power producer. So that shows a bit what you can do with engine technology. Then it has been, in many cases, have been baseload power plants, but of course the same analogy can be used then for the balancing power.
I've really enjoyed this talk. We need to care about what happens with the shipping world, don't we, really?
Absolutely, and that's what we are passionate about, because it's a global industry. It's something that is supporting all of us around the globe, and it's something where we have a tough target. It's a doable target, but it's also a target where we need to collaborate a lot throughout the whole ecosystem, the fuel providers, the ship owners, ship operators, equipment providers. It's a totally different collaboration need compared to before, but I'm at least excited about this because I think it can be done. We need to speed up, that's very clear, but we have the momentum. It can be done. We can decarbonize shipping in one vessel lifetime.
How often do you get out on the boats, Roger?
Every now
Don't
and then.
tell me you get seasick.
Yeah, not that often, no. So I will take all the chances I have to get out on a boat. That's for sure.
Excellent. Well, I think you should definitely do that. I'd love to come and join you on a boat one time to see what this is going on. It sounds really exciting. Thank you so much for joining us on the Net Hero podcast. What's your thoughts on shipping? It's basically the way you get all the goods that you're wearing. So if you're thinking about decarbonising and cutting down your kind of carbon footprint, you need to worry about what's going on there. So give us your thoughts, get involved. If you'd like to be on the Net Hero podcast, drop me a line, nethero@futurenetzero.com. Roger, thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you all next time.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from futurenetzero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. futurenetzero.com. Better business, better planet.